You and I have both watched a lot of these hearings, been there on Capitol Hill for a lot of these hearings. This is a rarity. They dove right in, boy. The back and forth from the very opening moments was contentious. And I think that if anybody had any questions about exactly what Matt Whitaker was ready to reveal, he's already answered it.
Yeah, Matt Whitaker has said very little, but I think we've learned a lot. First of all, I've been doing this a while. I have never seen a witness tell a committee chairman that his or her time is up. That's extraordinary. I mean, Matt Whitaker is a former college football player, and it looks to me like he is trying to run out the clock on this hearing. His answers, even to basic questions, have been as long-winded and discursive as he can possibly make them, even just to get to yes or no questions. That's not going to help. They will keep him here as long as they have to get the answers that they need. And oh, by the way, we learned that the committee now intends to bring him back to get answers to the questions that he is invoking this kind of squishy executive privilege on, saying he won't talk about them. But the White House isn't invoking executive privilege. The other thing that we're seeing here is the playbook that Republicans will use over the next 2 years to frustrate Democrats in their oversight efforts here. You saw it from Doug Collins, the ranking member here, calling this a dog and pony show and a sideshow in his opening statement, and then turning that into a self-fulfilling prophecy by calling for an adjournment vote that he knew could not pass, calling for a point of order in the middle of a question from the chairman, trying to obfuscate what is going on in these hearings and make it difficult for Democrats to get answers when they bring Trump administration officials in front of these committees. Expect to see that playbook play out time and time again over the next 2 years. But we are getting some substantive answers from Matt Whitaker, I think, on those key questions.
Yep.
Saying he has not interfered in the Mueller probe. I think Democrats are going to want to dig in that much more closely. And saying he hasn't talked to anyone in the Trump administration about it. The question that I think is going to get a lot of attention and a lot more follow-ups when they come back from votes here is how confused Whitaker seemed to be on the question of whether or not he'd talked to a third party about this and who might constitute a third party. And his answer was kind of bizarre and kind of interesting, saying, you know, he's usually the end point for briefings, not the starting point. That didn't sound to me like a definitive no, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Democrats pick at that a little bit to see if maybe this is the out here, that he might be providing information to other people that somehow gets back to President Trump. So we're learning a lot from the very few words that Matthew Whitaker is using here on the stand so far.
Let me go to Pete Williams. Pete, you're also somebody who has watched more than a few of these over the years. What's your headline out of this so far?
Well, I think the headline is that Matt Whitaker has said that he didn't get briefed on the special counsel investigation when he worked for Jeff Sessions as chief of staff because Sessions was recused, and that meant his whole staff was walled off. So he said that publicly. That was our assumption. He's confirmed that. As Garrett points out, he says he has not talked to the president about the special counsel investigation. He's saying that publicly. That was in the Justice Department's letter to Congress yesterday, that he would say that if he was asked, that he had not briefed White House staff or anybody else about the special counsel investigation. And tellingly, perhaps the most important thing he has said so far is that he has not been required to take any action. In other words, no yay or nay decisions about the special counsel investigations, and he says he has not interfered with it in any way.
So remind people how that works, why that's important.
Sure. Well, under the special counsel regulations, normally speaking, the Attorney General appoints the special counsel and is in charge of the special counsel's supervision overall. But because Jeff Sessions was recused, that fell to Rod Rosenstein. Then when Matt Whitaker became Attorney General, he was not recused, so he once again assumed that responsibility that's in the rule. So the special counsel doesn't have to say Mother May I to everything he wants to do, but the large decisions are made by the Attorney General. What he said is basically he hasn't made anything. He hasn't made any decisions, hasn't said yes or no to anything the special counsel has asked. And I have to say, Chris, what we're hearing now from him in public is our assumptions and the signals that we have gotten from the Justice Department privately, that he's briefed on it. We've known that for some time, but at the same time, he hasn't really had his hand on the throttle of the special counsel investigation.
So let me go back to a little bit of the exchanges that we have seen. This is about the question of whether or not he had been briefed on the investigation. Let's take a listen.
As you know, I cannot talk about ongoing investigations.
You can say whether you've been briefed or not.
And as you commented about my recent press conference, as it relates to the special counsel's investigation, I have been briefed on it.
I mean, there were more than a few eyebrows raised when he made some of the comments he made at that press conference. It's hard to see Nick Confessori how, if he can go to a press conference and answer some of these questions, he can't do it before a committee of Congress.
Yeah, it was a real goof at the press conference. And I got to say, you know, what you saw there from the committee chairman was a series of yes-no questions. So they were trying to box him in by saying, look, you can't go into any details, so here's some yes-nos. Don't divulge any confidential communications or privileged communications with the president, but did this happen, did this happen, did this happen? And what's strange to me about it is that in the end, he answered most of those questions. But there was a lot of like moving around and back and forth before that. And I feel like it should have been, you know, prepared for that from the get-go.
Yeah, this is not a surprise, Glenn Kirshner. I guess this is it. And when you go before these committees, and Chuck, you can weigh in on this as well as somebody who has gone before these committees, you don't just walk in there, right? You presumably have done a little prep. You know the questions that are coming. Your staff can tell you. You can read the newspapers, frankly, or watch cable television and figure out what the questions are that are coming. It seems like he came ready for a fight.
Yeah, I hate to say that perhaps he has a more political agenda than actually providing useful information to the committee and by extension to the American people. But as has been stated already at a press conference in an unrelated matter, he began talking about the special counsel's investigation.
And how long it was going to go on.
Exactly. It's about to wrap up. He's moving toward the end. And yet now, when that is sort of topic number one of relevance to this hearing, he is going to start to backtrack and equivocate and, frankly, be combative and treat this, notwithstanding the fact that he says this is not a confirmation hearing. It sure seems like he's treating it like a confirmation hearing. And, you know, we'll wait to see if he changes his attitude and actually begins to be more civil and more forthcoming.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.